Everyone again. Today I'm your moderator, Miguel. So actually today we will be touching on how EasyShare can actually strengthen your prospects, SharePoint's file governance and operations. And today we will have our product manager, Teck to share his insights to all of you. So before we get the webinar starting, um, if there's at any point of time, if you have any question, there's actually a Q&A button right at the bottom of your screen, and just feel free to write to us, and we will actually answer your questions closer to the end of the webinar itself. And so today's agenda is as such, how are we going to promote EasyShare to existing SharePoint customers? What are the different scenarios where EasyShare can complement SharePoint? And also at the same time, why have some EasyShare customers replaced SharePoint totally and never looked back? So now I'll pass the stage to Teck Wei. Over to you, Teck Wei.
Thank you, Miguel. Yeah, so we really organized this because in the previous webinar that we had about the file exchange protocols, right, the SMB and the FTP one, which I'll highlight again probably later. One of the feedback that we have is that a lot of people was asking, I'm already using SharePoint, isn't EasyShare the same thing? So this is the same thing whereby our own sales effort when we talk to prospects, as well as a lot of partners when we talk to prospects, always coming from this angle. So on a high level, right, we notice that when we start being compared to SharePoint feature by feature, that is usually not the kind of sales strategy we would adopt because it doesn't really work. And then what our team has done is that we gathered all our experiences and some of the customers that we have, and we are collating some of these stories that we have to share in today's webinar. So in my section, right, the first part I'll be sharing is really our experiences and the use cases. And then on the second part, I would like to introduce to you this concept about risk management and selling a security product. Because selling a security product, I realize is a bit different from like selling a product in the traditional sense. So the second part, we'll be moving on to that. And with that, let's move on to the first part. And what we did is that we categorized all the reasons why our customers have been getting EasyShare to be deployed into their environment, and what are some of the pain points that we hear from them. Bearing in mind, right, for here, right, we are not sort of like doing that comparison with SharePoint. It's really a gathering of what our customers and prospects have told us, as well as our own experience, because inspired by ourselves, we also use SharePoint Online, as well as publicly available information. So feel free to let us know if there's any new points or some points that in your experiences, your prospect might be telling you different things, and then we can all learn from each other to see how to provide a better solution for our customers. And with that, right, what we did here is that the 3 points we categorized first is in the space of what I call as external file sharing. So this one is a bit like the ad hoc kind of like file sharing things, a little bit different from collaboration. So the collaboration part, I will also elaborate a little bit later. The second area is we classify them as file governance. So in terms of the visibility, we also talk a lot about our audit logs and stuff. So going deeper into that. The third area is we call operations. So this is where the data is huge and then start to have performance issues, etc. So we'll be diving next into more details based on these 3 concepts. So you notice in our presentation, a lot of things is in 3 this time around. So when Miguel started, right, it's like 3 questions, right? How do we promote? How does EasyShare complement SharePoint? And in certain scenarios, how does it replace? And based on this overview, right, usually, of course, you all know EasyShare is very flexible, and most of the time we can have very different scenarios. But typically for external file sharing and file governance, there's a lot of complementary part that we can go for. And then file governance and operations, especially operations in our customers, right, a lot of them is actually replacing it. But I also do have ideas about like how it might be complementary as well that we'll be sharing later. So now let's dive into the first one, which is the external file sharing case. Now, looking at SharePoint, some of the things that we hear is that The external authentication options is a little bit more limited in the SharePoint case. So most of the time it's using email way or OTP, and some of our customers feel that it's not enough because the link is going to the same email and the OTP is also going to the same email. So they find that it's a little bit inadequate in that sense if they're using SharePoint when they deal with the external parties. Second point, there are some users that they find that there's a little bit confusion when it comes to the sharing options due to the way things are designed, and sometimes we also receive feedback that users are confused. They thought that they didn't share with a particular person, but apparently because of the settings that they use, they actually perform the share to people that are not intended to. In fact, it's also quite funny. Sometimes I receive email from SharePoint Online to tell me that somebody has downloaded this file. If it's unintended, please do this. So it seems as though there's a lot of people that have all this accidental sharing that they're also providing some of these things, which is like a little bit like a stopgap, but it doesn't address the fundamental things whereby in terms of user behavior, there seems to be some confusion in this area, and that is something that we hear from some of our customers as well. And the third part is there's a lack of visibility in terms of to whom and what kind of files has been shared. So it's very easy to do file sharing in SharePoint. That is something that is done well. But when we look at their angle as to if you want to know for a particular person, for example, if I'm sharing files to Miguel, I want to know all the files that I have actually shared to Miguel. In SharePoint, it is possible, but it's not so easy. So sometimes you might have to run some PowerShell scripts, or you might have to get another tool to easily pull out all this kind of information. And that is the experience that we ourselves have gone through, and some of the prospects has feedback as well. And so in this case, that's where how EasiShare comes in. What we have is like what you all know. For our external file sharing, we have authentication, which is a bit like 2FA in the sense because the link is going to the email, but the OTP is going to SMS and WhatsApp. And if you have attended our V11 webinar recently, we also have added Google and Microsoft Authenticator as another option to do that verification before the external party can download the files. And then to address the second part, which is just now the confusion in sharing. So most of our customers say that it's clearer for them because of our interface. They know what they're doing, what options they're applying to the share. So on top of that, right, there's also slightly more security options in terms of what the users can set when the link goes out. Finally, the most convenient one, in fact, we ourselves use a lot, is in our shared out screen, right? We can easily see a particular folder and file, right? Who has it been shared with and all the details. And we can also look at a particular person to see what are the files and folders that have been shared with them, so that we can able to trace all these things easily. And like this is just like summary of the first section. And what I would like to do is to explain this a little bit in the document lifecycle. So this one can get a little bit confusing, but I'll just run through it. So when we look at document lifecycle from customer's perspective, right? Usually there's a lot of different stages whereby a document is being worked on. At first, it might be a draft, and they might start moving and copying around, and that's where the collaboration work starts. After that, there might be a need to publish or share, and then there's the iteration process. So typically when we talk about document lifecycle, these are some of the stages that it has. And why am I bringing this in? Because a lot of times, many users, they use everything in SharePoint itself. So what they are doing is all the documents is in SharePoint. Then when these documents starts to get a bit more sensitive, right? At first, they will start sharing both internally and externally. That means whether I share to Miguel or whether I share to another person not from Inspire Tech, I use within the same SharePoint. Then at first, not much of an issue, but after a while, when more and more sensitive files come in, more and more users come in, there was always some risk that when sharing the same platform, that accidental share to the wrong party, especially to external, comes out. So where this scenario comes in, some of our customers do is that they lock down their SharePoint specifically for their intranet only. So that they limit the external sharing option. You only can share and collaborate within the internal. But that doesn't mean that they don't have to collaborate with and do that file sharing with external parties, right? So what they do is that over at this area, when they do external file share, they apply EasiShare to handle that so that they can have those visibility and security in that space. And then yet internally, right, they are protected from external risk. So that's one way to look at it. So, and that in this case, it's more a case whereby EasiShare is complementing SharePoint, and you limit SharePoint's access to internal only and use EasiShare to handle the external file sharing. So that's one way to handle this scenario. And with that, moving on to the second point is in terms of file governance. So again, a very security kind of concept. Now, what are some of the stories we hear from the market, right? Is the pain points like first, given the way SharePoint is, tends to become messy by no fault of SharePoint. So it's not a so-called a product limitation. It's just that we do observe that because the platform is so flexible, it's a bit hard to govern it and takes quite a bit of skills and effort to really control it. So a lot of customers we see, they end up with a messy SharePoint kind of structure, a lot of orphan document libraries or orphan SharePoint site. So it becomes one pain point. And the second pain point is that while there is a audit trail in SharePoint, so it's definitely they have audit trail, what our customers feel is that the experience is inadequate. So when they want to find out like who deleted a particular file at what time, it takes a little bit more skills and understanding to find it. And if they want a more comprehensive analysis, again, you might need to run some PowerShell level scripts, or if you do a search about SharePoint governance tool, right? There's even tools that comes for SharePoint governance. So the reality is that if there is another company that is developing a tool to address this, it means that fundamentally that inherent experience itself is insufficient. That's why it creates a market space for some of these tools to exist as well. And finally, there's also some feedback in terms of challenges in reviewing the permissions. So SharePoint is pretty good in a sense that there's a lot of flexibility revolving the permissions and privileges. But on another hand, it also creates some challenges when the structure of the permissions, etc., it's got a bit tangled up and messy and become a bit hard to review. So again, sometimes you look at the market, there are also tools to help you to do this kind of review. That is, you have to purchase a separate tool. So another indication that inherently itself, that experience is not something good enough for the market, and then some of these are coming in. That's why when it comes to this area for EasiShare, where we compare is that it is a centralized platform to manage all the different storages, so you can easily see who is having access to what and what are the spaces that are created for the respective departments, etc., via our CA admin portal, CA web portal. Okay, so storage management. Second point is the easy to read audit reports. So our customers, when they want to find something, they feedback that our audit reports, they're easy for them to find out what happened, and then when they need to answer to users' questions and stuff, they can easily find and troubleshoot and explain to them, oh, actually so and so deleted this file, or oh, so this one, the access was provided to this user on this time and under this feature and stuff. So that easy to read audit reports is getting important. So in the past, the focus on audit reports is really not as high, but nowadays, I think we can all see that increasingly people are expecting to know what happens to the system, because that focus on security has been ever increasing, especially in recent years, right? And even more so since last year. And the third part is our access review. So this is a feature we introduced last year, whereby can quickly help to generate the access review for the respective data owners to review. Now, coming into that big picture again, right? So just now I mentioned customers can have their SharePoint and then they make sure that it's not open to external, use EasyShare for the external file sharing. Now, in terms of file governance, right? So SharePoint does have some parts. Now, inside here, what we can do is as a replacement. So if there are people who want to replace SharePoint, they can replace it and then enjoy that better experience in terms of the file governance. Or if not, then they might be looking at having SharePoint and then having EasyShare on top of SharePoint. Now, what do I mean is that y'all might know that we have connectors to SharePoint, so we can connect to SharePoint. The repository is still SharePoint, but any collaboration related work is within EasyShare. Now, this part is a bit interesting as to how it complements, right? And I would like to mention one of the meetings I had about a few weeks ago. This is with a India company. So the pain point that they came to look for us is because they do have their internal repository. So in this case, not really SharePoint, but similar idea. They have their own internal repository, right? Then in the internal repository, in terms of the internal access and governance, is very strong. They purchase all the expensive, you have all the VPN, that IAM, identity access management tools, all the endpoint protection, all the network protection, everything is inside. But this is a very large bank. So they are protecting their internal stuff. Then the gray area comes is that there are groups of people where they might need to collaborate with the organization, but they are neither internal nor external. So just now I said I want to separate the first point from this particular point about collaboration. So everything sounds a bit like all like just collaboration, but there is a difference. The difference is that the earlier scenario that I mentioned in terms of external file sharing, we are talking about very ad hoc file share. Like I share with you one file once a year maybe. So it could be like auditors, or it could be like a party that you are going to meet once and you're going to share it once. So that is one group. And in that case, that use case is more like that earlier scenario that I mentioned under the external file sharing. Then second group is the easiest to identify, which is your internal employees. So they are within your network, within the intranet, all secured. They all have licenses to all that sophisticated tools in terms of identity access management and everything. Then this particular India company, their pain point is that they have this group of people. So this group of people is who? They are the associates. So this particular financial institution, they work with a lot of partners to sort of like promote and sell their banking products. And in this process, they actually have a lot of collaboration needs. So it's not just that kind of one-time sharing kind of thing. They weekly, monthly, or daily, they might have a lot of interactions in terms of exchanging data. So that financial institution might be giving some data to the partners, or the partners might be collecting personal data and then giving back to the banks. So this becomes a pain point when privacy concerns are coming in, right? You do not want this particular area to be that weakness that exposes the financial institution to penalties due to poor data protection policies. But because these partners, they are not really internal employees, and they go into the numbers of like 5,000 to 10,000, that kind of range, you also cannot be buying all these identity access management tool for every single one of all these sort of like partners and contractors. So now that is a case whereby you can potentially put in EasyShare to handle and govern that particular area. So internal one, they have all the sophisticated tools. Then for this particular group to govern that collaboration and stuff, then they use EasyShare. And that is another way whereby like EasyShare can be complementary to whatever the customers have in existing. Okay. So yep, in this short time, I can only give you a brief one, but if any one of you is interested to know more about all these details, right, feel free to let us know so we can also go into details as well as help you to analyze your prospects' needs and requirements. And now I'll move on to the third point, which is operations. This one honestly is quite rare, but when customers have this problem, right, it's almost a very high likelihood that they are looking to replace SharePoint already, because they have used it until it has reached a level whereby it's no longer suitable for them. So at first when they start using it, it's okay, but they have grown to a level that they might have grown out of SharePoint. And what are some of the issues that they face is, first, they start to see incomplete search results. So what happens is that when they search for something, right, they cannot find what their colleagues might have uploaded, or they can't find something that they worked on a while ago. So if you do a Google search on this issue, right, you will understand that it's Microsoft doesn't say it's a limitation, but there are some latency and some lag between how the indexing is actually working. So it becomes a problem when the search comes in. Secondly, we also see some customers, right, their SharePoint become unusable and very slow when that volume of data really increase to the limits that even Microsoft SharePoint has published. And that is because underlying, right, SharePoint is not putting files into file systems. They are putting files into the Microsoft SQL database. And while there are some conveniences behind doing that, like when they do certain backups or when they do certain operations, but when we talk about large files especially, then it usually becomes a problem. So this one usually don't affect people who just work with like Office documents. And in fact, that Office document integration, right, is very good to use with SharePoint, which is the reason why InspireTech ourselves, we also do have some parts that we use SharePoint, and then some parts that we use EasiShare in our own use case as well. And the third part is there's also some unsuccessful sort of like adoption, migration, more like adoption of SharePoint because of technical constraints. So these are typically more affecting engineering firms as well as media related firms. Like I said, that if your prospects is just doing documents, right, typically they are quite okay with just having SharePoint. But usually there might be a certain department, right, engineering or media, right, they will find using SharePoint a very headache thing. And then they might be looking for an alternative solution. And that's where EasiShare comes in again as well. So first up, right, I think some of y'all might know that we have our own basic search. So that's the very basic one. And in fact, we have been promoting for better search experience, right? We also work with our partners that have AI search capabilities in terms of how they index and do the content search. And that greatly enhances the search experience when we work with partners to enhance the overall solution offering. Next, also, in EasiShare, right, the uniqueness of us is that we don't store the files in a specific type of storage that we dictate. What we do is that we embrace the wonderful modern storages that are available in the market, and we combine with our software to give that overall enhanced performance to users using EasiShare, supported by good storage systems that is available in the market today. And relating to the third point is because EasiShare gives the flexibility for customers to choose the different type of storages. For example, if the use case is archival, they might not need high performance storages. They might want to be looking for cost-effective kind of storages. Then they can have the option to choose that type of storage. But if the use case is they want it to be fast, they want it to be able to grow exponentially easily, the scalability, those kind of things, then they might need to choose another kind of storage options. And then we also have the relevant connectors to those use cases as well. So all in all, so we have been trying to promote this flexibility thing because ultimately what we are really in is that to give the customers the choice to look at their needs, analyze what are the risks and pain points that they have, and then doing a solution based on their needs, which I want to repeat the point that I mentioned earlier. So when you want to sell EasiShare to the prospects and the potential customers, it's very hard to go into a conversation to tell them feature by feature, because if you start talking feature by feature, they start seeing file sharing, and then they start seeing like upload document, download document, right? Then they will start saying that, EasiShare and SharePoint like same, what's the difference? But If you understand their needs, understand the security risks, understand what are the pain points operationally that they have, then you can angle that conversation to solve those pain points, whether is it by complementing to SharePoint or whether by replacing with SharePoint, but that conversation will go better. If you start talking about like, oh, it's just file sharing, that kind, right? Usually we find that prospects and customers, they don't appreciate and they can't understand. But if you come in from the angle of like, oh, so you have a pain point there. Also, this particular risk, you are aware that this is something you want to address, and then they're more interested to carry on the conversation next. And with that, I come back to this diagram again. But for this operations part, right, what I want to show here is just that a lot of SharePoints actually end up in this situation whereby at first, sorry, maybe let me go back. At first, it's like simple, start with one. After that, when they grow, right, suddenly become many bits and pieces all over the place. And that creates the operational concern. Okay, we'll be going this a little bit more in depth later, but at this point, let me move back to this slide so you're going to see something similar again. But what I'm trying to do here is that based on what I've just explained earlier, I want to consolidate the whole thing and explain the various scenarios that I've just gone through to explain why EasiShare is not exactly same as SharePoint. Definitely some features looks very similar, but what are the differentiating parts to highlight, right? So again, first, the external file share request part. So that scenario whereby recommend the customers, especially when they start having sensitive files, the SharePoint don't allow external file sharing. Instead, then you have EasiShare to handle the external part. So it's very good for the users, right? The user know that, hey, if I'm doing sharing in SharePoint, it should be something internal. So there is a control there. And then if I want to share something to external, right, I should be using EasiShare. Then immediately the brain, right, kind of had that compartmentalization. So to me, this is always a bit like when some of y'all, if y'all do cooking, right, you use different chopping board, one for the vegetable, one for the meat. It's not that you cannot have one chopping board for everything, but sometimes if you don't wash properly or you don't wash it cleanly, it might have some problem. So you see chopping boards also got different type. So coming back to here, right, we also same thing. Internal, let them use the SharePoint, for example, and then external, they can use EasyShare so that there's a segregation, like reduce the risk of wrong share or data leakages. So that's like the first way, right? Second way in terms of file governance is where the audit logs and stuff, they might need some enhancement. So some scenarios is that they find that SharePoint, the governance is not enough, they want more, then they adopt EasyShare or they replace the SharePoint with EasyShare. Some scenarios could be like what I said about the India prospects. They still want to keep their internal repository, maybe like a SharePoint. Of course, in that case, it's actually not a SharePoint, but assuming let's say it's like a SharePoint. And then what the customer wants to do is that they have a group of partners. They are like internal, but not really internal. They also external, but also not really external. So this group of gray area, right? They want a system to handle this group of people. And then that is where you put EasyShare in as well. So another scenario. Then finally, the one that I skipped earlier on is in terms of operations, where grow until very big, right? So in this case, what I have in customers is actually, I have most of them is they replace. So they replace it because they no longer can use the SharePoint. The SharePoint is so slow, but I do see value in SharePoint. So I don't recommend that we always jump in to tell customers that they need to replace the SharePoint. Why? Because an organization can have many departments. So some departments, they might just be doing Office documents and they might just be collaborating based on Office documents. Then it's actually SharePoint is very good because it's definitely very integrated with the Microsoft Office suite. So in that case, those departments, right, might enjoy the experience of using SharePoint. Then there is the engineering and the video digital departments, right? Okay, those departments may have a bigger struggle with using SharePoint because it's not suitable for them, and then they might use EasyShare. So in the same company, there might exist two separate systems, but it's because the use case differ from departments, and that's why there's a need for a different system as well. So these are some of the angles, right, in summary, right, where you can talk to your prospects and try to explain to them where EasyShare sits in rather than going into that feature comparison. So feature comparison to me, right, really nothing to compare. It almost looks exactly the same. Where the differentiation comes in is, unfortunately nowadays, it's harder to sell things because we are talking about like customers expect better explanation, solution sales, value add. So the expectations of the market is that we have to help them see what are their use case, what are their pain points and risks, and then where EasiShare exactly is sitting to help them. And then after that, they will start carrying the conversation. So definitely cannot do the feature by feature kind of comparison anymore. When sometimes customers or partners ask me to have a feature by feature comparison, right? Usually I already sense that once we go down that line, right, it's very hard to convince the customer and allow the customer to see their pain points. They already see different thing already. But if you understand their environment, see their pain points, okay, then that angle usually is more successful. So I think with that, right, at this moment, I'll pass it back to Miguel first to do a poll before I do the second section, which is going deep about this whole cybersecurity and risk management idea.
Yeah, so I'll be now doing a short poll. I mean, thanks Wei for sharing those three areas. So I just launched the poll to everyone. So based on, I would like to actually gather some feedback and also your personal perspective when come to these three areas. You know, do you think your prospect, which of these three areas your prospects might be interested? And yeah, let's take like probably like a minute to get everybody's feedback.
Yeah, meanwhile, the content a bit heavy, so I will leave this slide on first.
Mm.
Quite a lot of things we are trying to squeeze in. Yeah.
So far, we have around 60% people have voted. If you have not voted, please help us to vote. Then I will share the poll immediately. Okay, I think most of our audiences have done their poll. Now I will just end the poll and share the results with you guys. So as you can see, most of the audiences are, are weighing between external file sharing and governance. So I guess nowadays the topic around security is there. It's just that how we can, position ourselves to highlight that how EasyShare can evaluate to existing prospects that are using SharePoint. So maybe I'll go back to you, Teck Wei, where you can share the rest of the slides.
Yeah, okay. In fact, actually, I was thinking operations might be lesser. So usually these are very large files. So most companies, they nowadays just deal with documents. But yeah, quite interesting to notice that quite balanced in all the three areas that we classified. And very nice that Miguel also talked about that value, right? So the next part, why I'm introducing you the idea of risk management is because the hardest question that we always get is the customers start asking, can you justify the ROI of this project, the return on investment? And for this, right, we really need to try to help the customer to see it not in the case of, let's say, like a ERP or you buy a machine. What I mean, right? For example, you buy a house or you buy a machine, you calculate your return on investment in terms of your rental or how much that the machine comes in. But not every project you can use this concept. In particularly for cybersecurity, right? Is also you can't really just use it literally. You can still have a bit of an idea of return on investment, but you can't really see it as how you would buy something that is like a machine or and stuff. And why the best example I want to tell you is about our health. So I'll use the health as an example first to explain. And really why I'm using this health, right? Because you think about it, health is a bit like a risk management. You don't really know how your health will be, and then you might need to take care of it, and then there will be insurance concept that come in. So all this is about risk management ideas. And the same risk management ideas, right, is exactly what cybersecurity space is about. No cyber security tools will tell you that 100%. Everything is about lowering risk, putting in controls. So that concept is something that we have to try to explain to customers so that they understand that they can't look at ROI in the traditional sense. They should look at it more from a risk management side. And one idea is I really like is in terms of our health and insurance. So in the past, when people are not so aware, the approach to health and insurance is a bit different. But nowadays, when people are more aware of like medical costs, healthcare, or other elements, right, we see that the idea is better. So like what I mean, right? Let me try to illustrate it into this story whereby like of us as human beings lah. So at first you're like a baby. So at that stage, right, you really don't have to worry much about everything. No, mostly your parents kind of will protect you and don't really need to be aware of any risk. You whatever happens to you, right, is you don't really need to bother, right? Your somebody will take care of it. Okay, but then after that, you grow a bit older, then your parents still taking care of you, but you need to start becoming a bit more independent, right? So you start being more aware of your own health and you start being more aware of the need to take care of yourself. So you may start exercising more, going for gym membership, taking note of what you eat, being more careful. And then after that, then you get married. Okay, then now it's not about yourself anymore. Oh, you got your own family, then you got your own child. Then not only you got to take care of yourself and worry about the risks and the pain points that you yourself only, you worry about your whole family. Then you may start looking at insurance in case something happened to you. You want certain protection mechanism for your family, or you want to do some preventive, make sure that you are taking good care of your own health so that you don't have that uh, issues in your family. And then finally, when you're like getting very much older, right? You worry about getting sickness, and then you worry whether do your dependents you still have the ability to take care of them. If something happened to you, right? How all these things will play out, and then you start to increase. You might increase your protection. That means increase your insurance, or you might increase your what you invest in terms of protection. So in this kind of example, right, when we look at insurance, or when we look at paying for things to protect our health, we don't look at ROI in that traditional sense. We don't look at like, okay, I buy this health product already, right? I get how much returns. You don't justify it that way, but you still have the ROI concept in the sense whereby you think about like, oh, I'm buying this to protect my health so that I don't fall sick. Because if I fall sick, I lose so much income. Then after that becomes a problem. And then that idea, right, you start to have to think, okay, so when you're buying a protection kind of thing, so cyber security, you are not buying for a profit return in that sense, but you're buying to protect yourself in case there is a cyber attack, or in case there is some incident that happens. So very similar to how you would take care of yourself as an age, right? And how I want to relate this and apply this to how I see EasiShare, because we are enterprise file security, so a very small space in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is definitely very big, so we play in the space of file security. And then how to see this, right? So commonly what we see is that we serve enterprises, right, and government. So for enterprises, especially when they first started out, they might be just less than 10 people. They don't deal with much sensitive data. They don't even collaborate much because they're just starting, right? And in this case, they may feel that Google Workspace, M365, which means SharePoint Online, are very much enough for them. And I would agree so, because at that stage, they don't really have much sensitive things, and the business is just starting up, and there are not many people, not much collaboration, very, very low risk. No need to really buy EasyShare and have extra and stuff. I probably also recommend that, okay, yes, stay with M365 and Google Workspace, definitely good enough. Okay, now, but companies don't stay at this stage forever. If they stay at this stage for forever, right, okay, then I worry for the organization itself. They will grow. So when they grow, they will realize, they are collaborating more. They start to realize that I'm dealing with external parties more, and I'm transferring all this information in and out more. But at this stage, they might not have such a high risk yet, unless they are dealing with sensitive data. For example, it might be a very small clinic, but they're dealing with sensitive patients' data. Maybe they are a lab that deal with AIDS or some disease testing, got those personal data, right? And then they have to protect it. Then in that case, they might need to think about like security elements. And that is just really the starting. And most of the time, people at this stage, right, it's more about that third party collaboration, because that part is more the pain point. They don't have like huge data sets anyway, because the organization is still small. But they also will grow. So we always hope our customers grow, right? So that we grow with our customers. Then after that, when they reach like almost near 200 plus already, suddenly each departments get bigger. So like previous case, right, this one, right, if finance got some data leak, right, you roughly know who is the person that leak the data one, because company is so small. If it's a finance data that leak, right, it's either this person or that person. The company is not that big. But once the company reach this size, right, finance department very big, marketing department also very big. Sometimes the finance data get leaked. You start to lose track of, actually what happened. Sometimes we are not even trying to blame people. We are just trying to understand actually what happened. How come this information not supposed to land in outside one, then outside people know? So even this kind of insights starts to become important. And that is the stage whereby people start looking at file governance. Because they need to know, like, it's getting so big, it's so hard to trace. When it's smaller, it's so easy to trace. If it's finance data, only one or two people have access. It's either this or that, right? Then when your finance department or your HR department grow, or some of your other departments grow, then it becomes a problem. Then the governance thing starts to increase in value. Similar to that insurance and health case, right? When your life events change, suddenly the importance change. And then finally, when we talk about large data enterprises, right, it's even more so about like trying to understand what is going on in their organization and to ensure that they understand the exposure and then have the controls. So yeah, really just want to quickly use this kind of model, right, to allow you to absorb. So quite a complex understanding. So I do hope that it'll take some time. Appreciate this concept, because what we need to do for our customers is really to kind of like educate and influence them to think of it this way, rather than that traditional way of like, okay, I'm buying a product, like how to justify the ROI and stuff. Like it's more about understanding what is the risk and pain points, and if a certain cyber attack or data loss happen, right, what is that cost? What is that pain? What is the disruption? Okay, and from that angle, you attach the value to it and decide how much they want to invest in a security-related solution. So I just want to sum up here, right, back to my 3 points earlier. So hope to link a bit, given that the content is quite heavy. So first case, just now I did say at the start, it's always about the external collaboration, like external file sharing kind of case. So that's where when companies' activities increase with third parties, and then because of the external exposure, you want to have that increased risk, and then EasiShare might come in. Then in terms of file governance, right, is that when you get bigger and then the information that you're dealing with could be more and more sensitive and classified, then you may also be looking at a solution to tighten up this process, and then EasiShare can come in again. And then back to the third one is when your company becomes so big, any potential system failures, any data accessibility issues can totally disrupt the company. And then that's another area whereby you start to look at EasiShare. So in fact, EasiShare alone is not enough. You start to look at EasiShare with, like I said, the high performance storages, high availability storages. In fact, for EasiShare also, you look at high availability architecture. So we have that flexible architecture. So all these things will come into play, not just a product feature per se. It's a lot of elements will come in to solution this solution and package it for the prospect and customers, for them to see the value and then understand how the technology is applied for their organization. Okay, and has been a very long part and very intensive. Hope you're able to get it. And with that, actually, this part is the last part. And what I want to share is a repeat of some of the things that we have gone through. So this part is really more about like just the SharePoint part and this concept of the risk management. What I wanted to promote was also, remember earlier this year, some of you have also attended about like our file exchange methods, and we spoke about SMB and SFTP, these two parts. So why I want to highlight is because these two use cases are still very strong for EasiShare. In fact, SMB itself, yesterday I just had a meeting. Customer had a nest. Customer feels that the audit trails and the traceability, like files getting deleted, they can't trace. They find the experience of a nest alone insufficient. They're trying to look for a solution that can allow them to govern all these things better. So the SMB's use case. And then after that, yesterday when I was looking through our weekly sales report, I also saw prospects. They're looking at replacing their FTP solution to have a better way to do file transfers with external parties. So these use cases are still very relevant today, and I still see a lot of them. And the reason why I want to bring out this SMB again is because in the past, ransomware was very tied to SMB vulnerability, and today still this ransomware is still going on and very tied to SMB vulnerability. And these two webinars really illustrates how EasiShare can help to reduce the risk in terms when there's a ransomware attack. But I also want to put a caveat in the sense that ransomware has become like mutated already, like the virus also mutated. It is so much more multifaceted and so much more complicated than the past. In fact, if there's any vendor that will tell you that their solution can solve all ransomware problems, probably that is not a vendor you want to talk to. Because if you watch this webinar that you can follow on our YouTube, right, you realize that we are explaining that actually ransomware is a very huge issue. EasiShare does play a small part and reduce the risk for a specific area in terms of the file security, but it will not work alone. The strategy has to include other components, whether it's integrating with our partner solutions or whether it's some other areas of solutions that have to come in the organization. So that is also very important. And because ransomware is such a big problem now, right, we do have some upcoming webinars with other partners to further look at how the preventive, detection, and recovery part can come in. So do look out for that. And strongly encourage you to reach out to your prospects to also join us the webinar, so I can try to share with them how to view EasiShare, and so as to assist them to see like how EasiShare might be a solution for their organization as well. And then with that, the last part before I pass over to Miguel is that today we speak a lot about just SharePoint as well as the risk and security elements of it, but not to forget we actually have many other use cases. So go back to the slides, like perhaps you might want to also relook at the slides and use cases to see what hopefully some of the new things I shared today can help you appreciate the use cases better. As well as, like I said, we always promote our flexible architecture, having the customers having the choice to choose the architecture that suits their need, to choose the different storages that is available for their needs as well. And finally, as per our strategy, we recognize that moving on, no one solution can solve all the problems. We have a lot of integrations with the partners, and that also falls in part of EasiShare's strengths in terms of mixing and matching all this kind of different partnerships to offer better solutions to customers as well. And with that, I'll pass back to Miguel then. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Wei, for sharing us your insights. And now we have actually reached question time, right? So I know there's a lot to digest here, but if you have any questions, you can drop us here now, or maybe closer to the end of the webinar where you'll be actually sent to the feedback form. You can actually address your questions over there as well, and we can get back to you on a later date itself. So actually, we have one question from the audience. Hidayah actually mentioned like, hi, I want to ask about audit reports, and for audit reports, how long the audit report will be retained, and also at the same time, can we actually purge the audit log? Yeah.
Okay. For our audit reports by default, right, the retention is forever. And you will also notice that from the admin portal, you are not allowed to purge audit log. So this is a deliberate design for security reason. The only way to purge, right, is from a database level. So we will need to run a database script to purge the audit logs. By and large, because the space occupied isn't that large, right, we tend to recommend to keep as much as possible, but of course purging is still available, but that purging can only be done on database level, deliberately designed so because we don't want to allow server administrators nor the EasiShare administrators to manipulate the logs. So that is the design principle behind it.
Yep, and thank you. There's also another question where somebody asked, is there any customers, do it another way around where they actually use EasyShare purely for internal use, but not for external?
Oh yeah, so correct. It also the inverse is also true. So just now I was saying how you keep the SharePoint for internal and then after that use EasyShare for external. There are also customers that they want to do it the other way around, whereby they have a internal NAS, they want to put EasyShare on top of their NAS for their internal part, and then secure the internal part. And then after that, they realize that they don't want to expose EasyShare to the internet. They want to have a separate system. So maybe they have a Google Workspace and then they have a SharePoint online maybe. Then what they instruct their users to do is that, okay, all the internal part you use EasyShare. When you want to collaborate with external parties, you use SharePoint. But then internal things, sensitive things shouldn't be uploaded to SharePoint. The reason why the CIO wants to do this is because don't want the user to mix up. So what we see is that when people use the single system, sometimes accidentally share, then the user say, hey, this person also called Miguel. Internally, I also got another person called Miguel. Then I type the wrong email, then the thing gets shared out, then something happened. So to reduce that risk is to split it. Of course, not 100%. If a user still so blur, uploaded the wrong file to that Google Workspace and then share it out, then those are other educational and people management things that needs to be done that can't just solve with technology alone. But having that segregation itself, some of the CIOs or CISOs, right, they do see value that it allows users to know that when I'm doing this system is for this purpose. When I'm doing this system is for this purpose. So reduce a bit of the risk that users get confused. Because sometimes nobody purposely want to make a mistake, right? They're just accident because they are all in the same system and sometimes they get confused. So these are some of the things that we see in the market as well.
Okay, then we have one last question in regarding to file type. So what are the file types that the customer have when they face the challenges in SharePoint itself?
Most common one, some is like design firms like Adobe files. They find that if they are working with SharePoint, they struggle a bit. The second group is the engineering drawings one, like AutoCAD. So what they find is that when they work with SharePoint, right, because of the size and because of the file types and the softwares that they use, right, the experience is not as smooth and they prefer an alternative. Yeah.
Okay, Ken, thanks. So before we come to the end of the webinar, I would just like to share again our resources that we have for our partners. You can actually go to our resources page in our website, and also at the same time, if you really need to know more about EasyShare, you can actually go to our playlist and get more information from there. And then on top of that, sorry. So on top of that, we are also at the end of the webinar. If you have any interest in our Battlecard, will actually give you touch on today's topic and also give you more details about the questions that you can ask your prospects in terms of their personal challenges they have within SharePoint itself. And yeah, if you'd like to have it, you can always answer put your feedback in the feedback form after this webinar itself. So yeah, actually that's all for today. Let me double check. Okay, there's actually one question left. Maybe Teck-Wei, you want to take it up before we end the webinar? So this attendee actually highlighted, is there any migration files from SharePoint to EasyShare?
Migration in practice, we don't have before. It's definitely possible, but any migration from SharePoint out from SharePoint, right, will always be quite challenging. In fact, I also have questions about vice versa. Sometimes putting in files into SharePoint, the limitations is usually like the file length, the file size have some errors. Anyway, back to this question about like migrating from SharePoint to EasyShare, right? Most of the time, no, because nobody really want to do a migration. But remember, EasyShare have SharePoint connector. So some of the customers look more towards that. to connect to the SharePoint, then what they do is that they connect to the SharePoint and they connect to new storages. Then the SharePoint one, they leave it as read only. And then they tell the users, after 3 years, this SharePoint will be no more. Then gradually, you let the user start moving the files. So when they have new files, they put into EasiShare. And then if they want the old files, they copy out the file from SharePoint and then put into EasiShare themselves. And then after 3 years, you tell the users, okay, 3 years time no more already. If you want extension, you request extension. If don't want, then after that is decom already. So some of the customers, when they migrate it this way, right, they see more value. Because definitely possible to do the big bang migration, but I can only say really very painful because SharePoint itself, right, to do very high volume migration, if you go SharePoint online and you see about migrating into SharePoint, right, there's a lot of like throttling issue, file size issue, file name convention issue that you have to deal with. So it becomes very costly. So most customers end up decide that gradually let the user go and figure it out could be a better solution. But nonetheless, open to discussion with your prospects and customers and see which way they really want to adopt, and then we support them accordingly.
Okay, Ken, thank you. So actually we come to the end of the webinar. I mean, thank you so much for everyone's participation, and yeah, please help us to fill in the feedback form. Thanks again for everyone's time, and thanks, TechWay. Okay, goodbye.